Welcome to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Joyous conversations about what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about our one reality. You have nothing to fear. You are eternal and you are perfectly loved. Knowing the truth changes everything. Now, here's Roberta.
Welcome to Seek Reality. I'm Roberta Grimes, and I'm so happy you're with us today. You know, every field of endeavor has its venerable elder statesmen, and in the area of afterlife research, there are some very important leading lights. I so much admire a few afterlife researchers who came just before Craig Hogan and me. And like us, they were sifting through original source material that was produced around the turn of the 20th century, primarily by those who had studied the work of physical and deep trance mediums in southern England and in the northeastern United States. The communications who were received from those that we used to think were dead via those extraordinary mediums were really much better than any that have been received either before or since in terms of quality and, frankly, sheer volume. And that was a time of optimism among those doing the studying. It was before what was then called the fundamental scientific dogma of materialism had altogether shut down the possibility that scientists would ever be allowed to study afterlife communications. And those mediums produced such wonderful material, unlike anything ever produced either before or since. Foremost among that generation of giants is our guest today. Michael Tymn is with us for the seventh time and all the way from sunny Hawaii. And when Michael and I put our heads together about what we might discuss today, what he suggested was the difficulties of afterlife communication. My friends, this is actually a huge problem. Those that we used to think were dead are pretty much exactly where we are now. But still, afterlife communication is difficult. And if it weren't so difficult right now, we would have altogether banished the fear of death from the world. So the question is, why is it so hard? But there are some good reasons why. It all does make sense, but it's complicated. So we're going to devote some time today to talking about that. But meanwhile, we should add that the illustrious Michael has written a treasure trove of wonderful books. They're excellent, wonderful, terrific books about the heyday of great afterlife communications. I think I've read them all, and I can recommend them all without reservation. Michael Tymm's books are wonderful, and frankly, what I think is best about them is that they're scholarly, they're very carefully written, but they're also what I think of as really zippy page turners. I mean, nobody wants to read a heavy tome anymore. Everybody wants a book that you can kind of enjoy all the way through. And all Michael's books read that way, every one of them. My favorites of his books are Resurrecting Leonora Piper, Transcending the Titanic. You got to read that. I think Dead Men Talking was the one about the World War I soldiers. We'll ask him, trying to find their way home. The Articulate Dead was great too. And frankly, I could talk about his books even without inviting him to join us, but why don't we have him come in? Michael, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here.
Well, thank you very much, Roberta. I appreciate the opportunity. I'd just like to qualify that I'm not a researcher per se. I consider myself a reporter, a journalist of sorts. I majored in journalism in college and was a part-time journalist throughout my insurance career. And then after my retirement in 2002, I got back into journalism. And so my focus has been on as you indicated, on the early research, that between 1850 and 1930 or thereabout, not on the current research. So my job, as I see it, is to report the research, not to do the research itself.
And as you can see, one of the best things about Michael Tymn is he's so humble. I mean, I think that's one of the most delightful things about you, frankly, Michael. And he lives in Hawaii too. If you can imagine being able to just spend all your time there. He's always on vacation in a way. Although you probably don't see it that way because people who live there.
No, I mean, it gets old after a while. But, I enjoy it. And I miss traveling. I haven't traveled for several years now, and always look forward to trips to the mainland and to Europe and so forth. But it's not all that bad. Once you get away from the beach, there's really not that much to do. I mean, my first year here, I was a day without going to the beach wasn't a complete day, and then after about a year, it was once a week to the beach. After a couple of years, it was once a month to the beach, and then after about 3 years, it was once a year at the beach. So now it's once. The only time I go to the beach now is when we have visitors, which we had recently, and so I had an opportunity to go to the beach and enjoy it then.
Well, the thing about Hawaii that I remember is I had, back then, this was quite a long time ago, pineapple, when we got it, by the time we got it on the East Coast of the United States, was sort of like eating, cardboard. And then we went to Hawaii, and the pineapple, you drive to the field, and they would cut you a pineapple, and they would just, with this big machete, they would cut off the top, and they would cut you a slice. I never had anything like that in my life. It was the most delicious. I just ate pineapple the whole time we were there. It was unbelievably good. So
well, I don't think you can. I don't think they're growing pineapples here these days. In fact, I think they cost more here in Hawaii than they do in California.
Really? Oh my goodness!
I'm not sure about that, but I heard that. But they're they really cut back production of pineapples here over the last 20 or 30 years.
Yeah, well, this was during the Vietnam War. My husband was Vietnam. He wasn't in any real danger because he was a doctor, but we met there when he was in the for R&R when he was in Vietnam, and that was such a wonderful time. I remember it so well. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we're going to talk about serious stuff, and one of the things that many times people will do this. They'll have a loved one who's dying, and they'll say to the people that are around the bed, they'll say, "All right, here's the key word. If you want to make sure I really survived. All right, I'm going to give you this key word, and I'm going to tell you, if you hear me say this key word from there, I survived. Okay, everybody, here's the magic key word." And almost, I don't know of a single instance where the person was able to give the key word. And that's one reason so many people don't believe in an afterlife. And apparently, Thomas Edison had a key word or more. And you just wrote a blog post about it. Talk a little about that.
Yeah, it was a TV program I happened to see about a month ago, and I didn't catch the first part of it. So I think it was on the History Channel, or one of those channels. And the gist of it was that Edison was a friend of Joseph Dunninger, the famous mentalist of that time, and supposedly gave Dunninger 10 words that he was going to try and communicate to him after his death. Why 10? How many out of the 10 they would have had to get to be successful. They didn't say. But Dunninger was a skeptic, and indications were that he wasn't buying any of it. But anyway, after Edison died in 1931, Dunninger arranged a seance with some medium. They said her name was Warner, I think. I didn't recognize the name at all. At the top of the Empire State Building, supposedly because that was closer to heaven. And nothing happened. They sat there, and something did happen. They got a lot of raps, a lot of noise. They didn't know what it was, whether they were spirit raps or not. They don't, there was that consideration. And who was there besides Dunninger? They didn't say. They said that 3 or 4 other people were there, but they didn't name them. So we don't know what they had to say about it. But Dunninger supposedly determined later on that the raps were plumbers several floors below the floor they were on, banging on the pipes and so forth. So whether that was actually the case or not, nobody seems to have confirmed it. I mean, it may have been Dunninger's way of explaining it, because he didn't really seem to want it to be successful. He was a skeptic, and all indications were that he didn't expect anything. They supposedly got one word, and that word wasn't one of the 10 that
Oh, gee.
that Edison was trying to get through. It has something to do with the location of his laboratory in northern New York. So anyway, it was deemed a complete failure, and the television commentators said that, you know, it was clear that the medium was a fraud, and the inference supposedly was that there is no life after death, and we can't communicate after death, and that's the way the program ended.
And so, but you wrote a blog post in which you gave some reasons why perhaps the communication didn't happen.
Right. I set forth 12 possible reasons. The first one is that maybe the medium wasn't a real medium. Maybe Dunninger, just arranged for somebody to call herself a medium and brought her in hopes that expectations that she would prove that mediumship is all fraud. So that was one possibility. And the second one is that along that same line is that it was a prearranged failure. Dunninger didn't really want success. He just arranged it for a fake medium and reported that there were plumbers below making the noise and so forth. So there's nobody that really confirmed that. There might be detailed records someplace if we dig for them, but I wasn't able to find anything on the internet that related to this. The third reason was Dunninger seems to have been very hostile towards all mediums, and one thing that comes out in the study of mediums is that hostility turns off the other side. There's got to be harmony between the communicators, yes, the medium, and those present at the seance. And it's clear that Dunninger just wasn't expecting anything. Fourth reason was that Dunninger himself was supposedly a mind reader, had telepathic abilities, but he didn't see any connection between what he was doing and a spirit world or life after death. It was just something that he had a special ability to do, so he might have looked at it as the so-called medium just reading his own mind if she did get a word or two. The fifth one was that there was no sympathetic link, as they call it, that the medium may have had abilities, but she didn't have any real link to Edison. People, you just can't dial in and say, I want to talk to Babe Ruth or President Roosevelt or whatever. There's got to be a sympathetic link.
Right. Exactly.
To the person. So, that was missing. A sixth one was symbolic language. It's possible that Edison, if he did get through, might have communicated, a few of those 10 words. I don't know how many of the words he would have had to get through for Dunninger to call it a success. I suspect that Dunninger would have expected all 10 of them to come through. If he got 9, it would have been a failure. But one thing that comes through in psychical research is that the word communicated by the spirit might come out as a synonym of sort. It's a thought image that comes through, and the way it's interpreted by the medium may not be the intent of the spirit. It said it could be a synonym for that word, meaning essentially the same thing, but not the word itself. So, the seventh possible reason was that Edison still hadn't awakened on the other side. He was still, quote, unconscious. They didn't really say how long after the after Edison's death that this